This video is on using the values we collected for shoreline distance, household ratios, and land areas in the previous videos to allocate the portion of the county level emissions to the reservation level for non-road sources. So in the previous videos in this modules, we went over how to possibly collect some of that data for shoreline distance, households, and land area for the county and then for the reservation portion of that county. So in this particular example, for this fictional reservation, it spans two counties in Arizona, and that's Coconino County and Yavapai County. And in the previous videos in this module, we went over how to collect that data using some online sources, and we included that in a spreadsheet. So now we're going to enter that information into a spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet that we're looking at right now is the Nonroad spreadsheet. And this is the same spreadsheet that you used in the EI fundamentals training to look at the county level emissions. So if you need a copy of that spreadsheet, you would go to the EI fundamentals training site and you would go to module 4 and you'd go to the accessing your NEI data folder and you would download the spreadsheet for the location that you needed. If you need assistance with that, please let us know and we can help you with that. So when you first download the spreadsheet and open it up, you're going to be in the equipment type summary tab or the worksheet. So near the bottom of the screen, see equipment type summary. That's where you're going to be by default. But the worksheet that you actually want to be in is the allocation worksheet. So you need to click on the allocation tab here to go into that worksheet. So we're going to do that. And then when we do that, that opens up this new worksheet. And the first thing you want to do is notice the state county box in the middle of the screen. So you want to select the first county that you're going to be entering the values for. And in my case, that is Coconino County. Unlike the on-road spreadsheet, you have to allocate the emissions separately for each county. So we need to start with one county and then move on to the next. So we're going to start with Coconino County. So let's go ahead and click on that. And now you'll notice in the table to the left, these emissions in this emissions tons per year column are the emissions summed for each equipment type for the entirety of Coconino County. Then you'll notice there's also this reservation emissions column in this table, and that's all zero now because we haven't run any allocations yet. So right now, this is all zeros, but as we work on this spreadsheet, this is going to populate with emissions. So if you scroll to the right here, you'll notice two other tables. This first one at the top here, that has the highlight in it, is where we're going to be entering the county values and the reservation values. And then below it, here's a reservation emissions for Coconino County portion. So this table is also going to populate with the values here. So this table is just set up in a friendly format so that you can easily copy and paste this into your emissions inventory, and it follows the format of the table that is in the mock level 4 emissions inventory. So let's start with entering our Coconino County values. So remember that we're only estimating emissions for 4 non-road equipment types, and that was construction equipment, lawn and garden equipment, pleasure craft, and recreational equipment. So for the other equipment types, we're just going to leave these cells empty. So let's start with our shoreline distances that we collected. So remember from the previous videos that the county value, so the total county value shoreline distance of lakes that allow motorized boats was 1,999 miles. So we're going to enter that first. So we enter 1999, and we're going to tab over to the reservation value. So remember, there was only one lake on the reservation that allowed motorized boats on this fictional reservation, and the shoreline distance was 13 miles. So we enter that in, and then we're going to tab out. And notice what happened when we did that. So the ratio value got populated automatically, and also the pleasure craft emissions in this table got populated. So these are the portion of the total county emissions that we estimated are occurring on this fictional reservation. So that's the shoreline distance. Now let's move on to the households. So for Coconino County, for the households, we're going to enter that in the lawn and garden equipment. So we're going to use the household ratio to estimate the lawn and garden equipment emissions. So the county value was 46,711 total houses in the county, and the number of occupied houses in this fictional reservation was 250. So we tab out, and the same thing happens. The ratio got automatically calculated by the spreadsheet, and the lawn and garden equipment emissions got populated here. So now we're going to move on to the land area. So for land area, we're going to estimate construction equipment, and we're also going to use the land area to estimate recreational equipment emissions. So let's enter the land area of Coconino County, and that was 18,646 square miles. And the reservation value for this fictional reservation is 435 square miles. And we'll do that same entry for recreational equipment. So there we have it. Now we've got an estimation of the portion of the emissions that are occurring on this fictional reservation in the Coconino County portion of this reservation. So remember, there's also a Yavapai County portion of this fictional reservation, and we need to estimate those emissions next. But we want to go ahead and copy this information out of this spreadsheet so we can do that, and we can erase this data and enter the data for Coconino County. So what we need to do is copy this data into a new spreadsheet. So I'm going to highlight all of this data, clicking and dragging. Got it all highlighted, and I'm going to right click and do copy. And then I'm going to go into a blank spreadsheet that I've opened here, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do paste special. The reason I can't do paste is, watch what happens if I just do paste. So what happens here is a bunch of errors, and the reason for that is that by default, the formulas are being pasted, and we want the values to be pasted instead of the formulas. So what we need to do is do paste special. And what I want to do is I want the values pasted, and I also want the formatting of the number pasted. So I'm going to make this selection values and number formats. And then click OK. And now we've got our Coconino County portions of the emissions in a new spreadsheet. So at this point, I would suggest saving the spreadsheet just so you don't lose it. So I would go ahead and save the spreadsheet. And then I would go back into my non-road spreadsheet, and we're going to start working on the Yavapai portion of these emissions. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is we need to blank out these values. So we need to erase these values we entered for Coconino County. So let's go ahead and do that. We click in the cell, we press the delete button on our keyboard, and we tab over, and we do the same thing here. We're just cleaning out this spreadsheet and getting it ready to enter the Yavapai values. I just like to do things slowly, so I do it one at a time. And now let's scroll back over here. And now what we need to do is in the state county box, we need to select Yavapai County instead of Coconino County. So let's go ahead and select Yavapai. And then notice the table names changed to Yavapai. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to scroll to the right here. And we're going to enter those values that we determined as shown in the previous videos for Yavapai County. So remember, in this fictional reservation, there was not any lakes on the Yavapai County portion of the reservation that allowed motorized boats. So we don't have a shoreline distance value to enter. We just have our household and land area. So we're only going to be estimating emissions for lawn and garden equipment, construction equipment, and recreational equipment for this portion of the reservation. So let's start with our households and the lawn and garden equipment. So the total number of households in Yavapai County was 9,903, so 90,903 households. And in the reservation portion, it was 129 occupied households. So ratio populates and lawn and garden emissions populate down here. So let's move on. Construction equipment, that's going to be a land area ratio. So the land area for Yavapai County is 8,133 square miles. And the reservation portion of this fictional reservation is 158 square miles. And we will do that again for our recreational equipment. All right. Now we have a calculation of the Yavapai County portion of this fictional reservation emissions for our non-road sources. So we're going to go ahead and copy this table into the new spreadsheet that I copied the Coconino County portion into. So let's do the same thing here. Let's highlight everything. Right click, copy, and let's go into that other spreadsheet here. And let's go ahead and paste it right below this table. So we have to do the same thing, paste special, because remember, paste is not going to work. So let's do paste special. Values in number formats. All right, so now we've got the Coconino County portion of the fictional reservation and the Yavapai County portion of the fictional reservation. And what we want to do now is we want to sum those two values together so we have a total reservation level non-road emissions estimated. So how do we do that? The way I like to do it is to use Excel because it's easy to write out those formulas in Excel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy this table and paste it. I just want to paste the structure of the table, and I'm going to be removing those actual values from the table. So I'm just going to do a copy here and do a paste here. And I don't need to do paste special since I'm going to be removing those values anyways. So I'm just going to do paste. And now I'm just going to make this a shell. And I'm going to change the name so I don't confuse myself. So I'm going to change this to reservation non-road emissions. And I'm going to take out the Yavapai since this is going to be the total reservation estimation of the emissions. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these values. I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard after highlighting them. And now I'm going to write formulas to calculate the sum of the Coconino County portion and the Yavapai County portion of the fictional reservation. So the first cell is this agriculture equipment cell, and it's the carbon monoxide emissions. So in Excel, when you write a formula, you always start with the equal sign. So press the equal sign on my keyboard. And then I want to highlight the first cell that I want to sum. So I need to click on the first cell I need to sum. So I go up here, and that's the agricultural carbon monoxide. And I click in that cell. And so then I want to do a plus sign. So on my keyboard, I do the plus sign. And then I click in the next cell that I want to sum. So that's going to be agriculture carbon monoxide for the Yavapai County portion. And then I press enter on my keyboard. And that sums those two cells together. Now I want to click and drag because that copies the formula into these other cells here. So I'm going to click and drag, and that's going to copy this formula. And then I'm just going to do a quick QC check. Whenever I copy a formula, I like to make sure that it's copied like I thought it was. So let's do a quick QC check on one of those cells I copied into. So for VOCs, it's H3 plus H16. If you click in the cell, it highlights which cells those are summing. So you'll see that it's summing the correct ones. It's summing the VOC cell for agricultural equipment in both of these tables. So that's exactly what I wanted. Just a quick QC check. And I'm just going to press enter to get out of this formula. And then I'm going to click and drag and fill the rest of these formulas down. So if I click and drag, this is going to fill up the rest of these formulas. And again, I'm just going to do a quick QC check and make sure that this formula copied like I wanted it to, and make sure that it's actually the total PM10 primary emissions. I'm just going to do a quick QC check on that. So it says cell E12 plus cell E25. So let's make sure that is right. So, okay, so it's the total PM10 here in this top table and the total PM10 in this bottom table. Those two sum together. So that's good. Looks good. So now I've got my reservation non-road emissions calculated in a table. And at this point, I would suggest saving this spreadsheet just so you don't lose any changes you made if something was to happen to your computer, etc. So I would save the spreadsheet at this point. And then I would also make some formatting adjustments to this table just to make it look good when I paste it into my emissions inventory. So I'm going to make some formatting adjustments here. I'm going to make these cells here. I'm going to add a border to them. So I'm going to right click and do border. I'm going to do all borders. And then I'm going to make these bold. So I'm going to make the headers bold. Right click. And I always just right click to bring up this little shortcut box. And then I'm going to make the totals bold. And what else? I'm going to make these a little bit easier to read because these are kind of overflowing. So I'm going to make the headers a little easier to read. So I'm going to do format cells. I'm going to change the alignment to wrap text. And that's going to make that text wrap around. So that makes them a little easier to read. I can also change the size of these cells so I can make them not flow over like that. I might do that when I paste it into my emissions inventory. One thing I want to change here is I'm going to change this text here, filterable and condensable. I don't think my reader needs that much detail on that. It might just be confusing to have that in there, so I'm just going to delete that filterable and condensable portion there, because it's a little confusing. Let's go ahead and delete that out. And what else? Here's something to notice too, is that by default, this table only shows 2 decimal places, and these ammonia emissions and these sulfur dioxide emissions are kind of small. So I want to perhaps show 3 decimal places in those columns. So I'm going to highlight those cells here and do right click, format cells, and then do number. And I'm going to change that to 3 decimal places. That looks better. I'll do that for sulfur dioxide too. Okay, so my table's looking pretty good. So I think it's ready to go ahead and copy into my emissions inventory. So for my emissions inventory, I'm just going to use a blank Word document because I don't have an emissions inventory handy right now. So this is just a way to paste it copy from Excel and paste into a Word document. So if I'm just going to highlight this whole table. Actually, before I do that, you know what I'm going to do? Remember that we only estimated emissions for some of the equipment types. We didn't estimate emissions for all of the equipment types. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those equipment types out that we didn't estimate emissions for. In other words, I'm going to delete out the equipment types that have 0 emissions for all of the pollutants. So I'm going to just highlight those rows here and right click and do delete. So that's going to make my table look a little cleaner. I don't need these if I didn't estimate the emissions for them. Oh, I left one. Get that one out. All right, so now I've got just the 4 that I estimated emissions for, just the 4 equipment types. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this into my emissions inventory. So let's highlight the whole thing and do copy. And then let's say this is my emissions inventory, and right click and let's do paste. So this is how it looks. I'm going to move these table lengths around a little bit so we can see everything. And when I do that, it changes everything else. So you might have to play with this a little bit to get everything how you like it. Yeah, that looks better. Then it's not going to scroll off the page. There we go. That looks like I want it. And there you have it. So that is one method of estimating emissions for non-road sources, and that this method is an allocation method. There are other methods out there, and you are, of course, more than welcome to use other methods in your emissions inventory. Perhaps one of those is using the EPA MOVES model to estimate non-road emissions. That's one option that's going to give you very accurate emissions. It's a little bit more complicated than this method, but that's out there for you if you want to learn how to use that model. We're also available to provide guidance on estimating your non-road emissions. Just let us know if you need assistance with that. One last thing you want to do is make sure all of your spreadsheets are saved. So you would just go into your spreadsheet, make sure you save everything before you move on. And that concludes this demonstration of how to estimate non-road emissions.